Hi, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. It is a Inside the Command Center Friday with my special guest, Rick Snider. But before we get there, Rick, you sent me this beautiful book in the mail, this joker right here, Presidential Pores. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit before we get into it. We can get to football later. First of all, welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
And tell me about the book. When did you get the idea for it? How long did it take?
Well, when you cover the commanders, you need a good drink. So,
Yes.
it's the only way we get through all this, I think. I'm also a tour guide in DC if you come, and I like presidents. I would find them really interesting people. Sometimes how in the world they got to be a president. I mean, it always amazes me, some of these people. I mean, Garfield became president on the 26th ballot of his convention because they were so tied. They just said, well, screw it, let's go with Garfield. And the man ended up being president. He wasn't even running for president. I mean, so things like that happened. And some of them were very nondescript people. I'd say of our presidents, we got about a dozen that were, a handful that were great, about a dozen that were good, about a dozen that were bad, and the rest were just, they just passed through the 4 years. And drinking, everybody loves drinking, so that kind of thing, but I found that a lot of them, only a handful didn't drink, including 3 of our last 4. Before that, there really only been Rutherford B. Hayes was the only teetotaler before. And, during Prohibition, they would do some things like, Herbert Hoover would go visit embassies in D.C. because that's foreign soil. So Prohibition didn't count there. But our early colonial guy, I grew up across the river from George Washington, so he's always been somebody I really looked for. George was a rager, man. That dude could make some money. Became the richest man in America making whiskey after his presidency on it. He was the first colonial planter that said, we're not doing tobacco anymore. We're not making any money. He was really a brilliant guy. And he's managed to beat the British pretty amazingly. And after, when he goes to be president, it's a 14-day ride, supposedly, to New York to become president. Started in Alexandria, had a big party going off there. Then he would ride every day 70 miles, stop. They'd have a big celebration because it's George Washington. So the dude had 14 big parties on his way to New York City. And I thought, man, I can imagine the last few days in the saddle. He'd been partying every night for 2 weeks, But he could, his afternoon was like drinking 4 glasses of 40% wine, not proof, 40% wine. He could read. But guys like John Adams, he started every day at 5 a.m. with a shot of cider. Hard cider, and Thomas Jefferson, went broke on wine. I mean, the early guys especially, colonials drank 3 times more alcohol than we do today because the water wasn't as safe, I think.
Right.
And then over the years, it just kind of varied. Even Abe Lincoln was supposedly not a drinker, but he did in his youth. He wasn't totally. And then people think like President Grant was a drunk. No, actually in his youth he was, but he stopped when he got in a much higher position of life. So they're all kind of, they're quick. It's a quick read. I do a lot of photos because you couldn't pick out people. I mean, let's see. If I said, who's this? You don't know. I mean, I don't always know. Benjamin Harrison. But, it's a lot of quick posts. There's a few recipes in there. You can get it on Amazon or at my website, monumentalthoughts.com, and I'll find it for you. It's only $15. But it's a quick, easy way to do history.
How long did it take you to put the project together, Rick?
Start to finish about 6 months, but I didn't work every day on it, and I lost momentum because I got COVID at one point and didn't do anything for 6 weeks writing-wise on the book. I mean, most books, like my last Redskins book, was 500 hours of work.
Right.
This one was maybe 50 hours of work. Mm-hmm. I knew a lot of the stories anyway. Being a tour guide, we talk about these things in DC all the time. And presidents are the one person in government that we all love or hate, and especially nowadays, we either love you or hate you.
Right.
They're the big personalities. It wasn't always that way, not until really Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy was a mint julep drinker, which kind of surprised me. It sounds a little sissy for him, but Teddy Roosevelt came into presidency and said, basically, listen, we can do big things, but, we need a leader. And Congress was often the leader back then, but he said, no, follow me. And presidents since then have pretty much said, follow me. Now, checks and balances, Congress, Supreme Court, and President can gang up on each other. It's a great way of keeping one guy from running things. But Teddy Roosevelt was a guy who really said America can be a big deal, which soon afterwards, World War I made us a big deal. So presidents are like that. And, they're the firestorm. Living in Washington, we see it all the time. So we have to try. They often say the two toughest jobs in Washington are the Redskins quarterback and the president.
It sounds about right.
I think the president sometimes are rooting against the quarterback to let them take some heat. And Richard Nixon once had a play for the team, and I think it cost them the game because Nixon knew George Allen real well. They're both California boys. And so Nixon came up with this misdirection play. Well, it never worked out for him anyway in life, but misdirection play, they lose 12 yards. They get pushed way back on a field goal, which gets blocked, and they lose the game by a couple points. And so Nixon cost them a playoff game.
I did not know that. There are a lot of presidents that did play football, though. I do know that. I don't have the number offhand, but I knew there were a fair amount of them that did. I wrote down here some of the drinks that I noticed. Truman was an old-fashioned man.
Yeah,
I love a good old-fashioned.
In and out of the cup, yeah. Old-fashioned. He was an old-fashioned kind of guy, But old-fashions are a pretty stiff drink overall.
Yes,
I think 22 of them drank whiskey. Just pretty strong too. Not too many beer drinkers, but a lot of presidents will be casual beer drinkers because it's like the man of the people, kind of thing.
Right.
Where everybody drinks, My dad was a Pabst Blue Ribbon guy, which today's beer is like strawberry seltzer, something or other. Oh my God, you guys are killing me out there.
There are lots of seltzers out there these days. I saw Clinton drink a snake bite. What is a snake bite?
It's a couple of hard liqueurs, and he actually went to Ireland on a trip, and they refused to serve it. They said it was illegal because it was so potent, it would put you on your butt quick.
Okay.
So it was like I'm trying to think what it's called. Let me look it up real quick. It's like a hard liqueur kind of thing.
Like a Ciroc, it's like a French liqueur, I think.
Yeah, blackcurrant liqueur. With beer, it's like 8 ounces of cider, which this is serious. 8 ounces of beer, and then something black liqueur, which is kind of like the accent drink to it. But Clinton said, "Too bad they wouldn't serve them; they would have seen his real side."
Yeah, right. Bush Senior was an absolute martini man.
Yeah, he drank a lot though. He drank a lot of everything. He was one of the World War II guys. So that generation really drank a lot, and they had good reason for it. But he, I don't think he pushed any glass away.
Were there any surprises that you found in the group? So maybe some non-drinkers that surprised you, or maybe the other way around.
Jimmy Carter was a big winemaker. And I thought Jimmy Carter would be a teetotaler for sure. And he drank beer too, but his family had that Big Plains, Georgia farm. We all know about Peanuts. And his brother who made Billy beer. Remember that nonsense? But he would, the family also set aside a lot of acres for wine for several generations. And he even used this 250-year-old Italian wine press to make wine. I read a big piece about him in Wine Magazine from way back. And he really knew his wine. I just didn't think he would drink it all.
Right.
And the biggest drunk of all, I didn't know this, was Franklin Pierce. People ask me all the time. He died of cirrhosis of the liver. He drank so much.
Interesting. I was surprised at how many of the presidents I had forgotten. As I read through that thing, it made me feel a little bit bad about myself in U.S. history. But I decided I would give myself a pass.
I mean, once you get past about 7 or 8 of them from the colonial era, then it kind of gets a little quiet for a while, until Lincoln. Then you kind of know around the Lincoln ones. Then it kind of gets quiet again until like Teddy or early 1900s. I mean, there's a generation before and after Lincoln you didn't really pay a lot of attention to. They just kind of passed through. And then since FDR, we pretty much know them, maybe because I'm old enough. I'm an Eisenhower baby. I don't know if you're quite old enough to be that one. But, It's been at one point there was like 7 straight presidents who had served in World War II, uh, all the way through the older George Bush. And when Bill Clinton became president, I remember it was a big deal. He had not served in the military, and the veterans would turn their back on him and all. We haven't had a president since Clinton who has served in the military. That used to be a main thing. To be president, you either had to serve in the military or be a long-term politician. But really, the military's we haven't had anybody since Bill. So, Obama and Trump and Biden and all, they didn't. And sometimes, like Eisenhower became president because he's a national hero on that after beating the Nazis. I mean, there are some positives to having military people because they know how to work together. They're goal oriented, those kind of things. If you have a longtime politician, they know how to get things done with Congress and all. Trump was the first guy in like 100 years since Herbert Hoover who was neither of those.
Right.
And, you can say what you want about all that, but, Herbert Hoover led us right into the Great Depression on that. They don't know how to play games. That's all the whole point. I mean, I watched the RFK vote the other night, and the House of Representatives approved a bill that would extend the lease at RFK to 99 years. They only had like a dozen left. So now it goes to the Senate, and then it's expected to be approved, and then DC can really make a deal for the team again. But at one point, the Maryland delegation votes against it because they want to keep the commanders in Maryland, so they're voting against this bill. And then we had it all ready to go by a voice acclamation, and some smart guy from New York goes, "I'd like to see a hand vote here." So we had to wait 3 hours for that, and it was like 6-1. Approval. Nothing gets passed in Congress 6-1. They were just like, here, this old piece of
crap. You mentioned earlier that you do tours around DC. I'm curious. I had to put a couple things on my list here. Which are more important isn't the right word, but what are bigger events? The peak cherry blossoms, the Christmas tree lighting, or the 4th of July fireworks?
Oh, well, it's close because the 4th of July fireworks get a good million people downtown at night. During the day, we have a big parade on 4th of July right down the middle of town. We took my grandkids last year to see it. It was like, I don't know, a couple thousand people maybe. I mean, you could walk right up to the street and watch them go by. This is 4th of July because people don't want to come early because they're going to be back at 9 o'clock for the fireworks. But at night, there's a million people. It used to be when they had the Beach Boys there and all, it was even bigger. But that was considered radical music by Reagan's people. It's like the Beach Boys, crazy to say, like, yeah, talking about, having fun. So but the cherry blossoms on a weekend, which are coming up, they just announced March 23 to 26 be the peak bloom, more or less. You never really know. And a million people will be down there on the weekend. Don't try and drive if you hear me when you come. Take the metro. So that's pretty close. I mean, on there. The cherry blossoms are a big deal. And this is the last year to see them in a way because they're what they call a tidal basin, a waterfront area. And they were brought in. We did the waterfront because most of D.C. was a swamp. So we kind of pushed it together, made the tidal basin area, reclaimed the rest of the land, like where Lincoln Memorial, all that's reclaimed land. Well, seas are rising, global warming, all this stuff we talk about. The water is pouring into the trees and killing them. So they're going to redo the tidal basin after this spring for a couple of years, chop down a lot of those trees. We have backup to bring in later. But the next 2 years are hard to see them. We grow cherry blossom trees on the edge of town because if something happens, we can plant a new one. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, 2 things happened that were really interesting. One was, as you probably heard, they didn't announce the Pearl Harbor bombing to the crowd at the Redskin game because the owner, George Preston Marshall, didn't want people to leave. He wanted them to stay there and eat hot dogs.
No, I didn't.
But the players found out afterwards, and Sammy Ball and a bunch of the Redskin players marched to the Japanese embassy with the intent of killing those diplomats. They were going there to do it. And the Army had to beat them to them and say, hold on, Sammy, we got to exchange these guys for our U.S. diplomatic corps in Japan. If you kill them, they're going to kill you. And we did about a year later exchange prisoners, or else Sammy Ball would have killed these guys. And then they all decided we're going to go down the tidal basin and chop down all those cherry trees and they had to get the military National Guard down there to protect the trees. So occasionally a beaver wanders through, and there is a shoot on sight thing there that you can kill the beavers right there, because these trees are, man, you bring in 1 million people, it's money to us.
That's right.
Like a tour
I did
guide.
not realize there were backups to be had.
Yeah, because most of the trees will last about 50 years. And then they just, one at a time, or something can happen. We had a tornado bust through there a few years ago. It came right across it. So we had backup. I guess we're growing more, but they were a gift from Japan. And I love the Japanese ambassador loves to say it represents our 100 years of, friendship. Yeah, except for them 4 in the middle, man. There was a few rough years in the middle of that, but people come there. It's weddings all the time around there. I've seen weddings at 8 in the morning. I mean, where's the reception? Denny's? I mean, that was crazy. But they have them. A few years ago, it snowed and a freak storm killed all the blossoms. It was really wild to watch on that. But, it's one of these things. It's free. You can come see it. It's a lot of fun. The magnolia trees come in like a week earlier. They're awesome, too, I think. I like them better.
Those are my favorite, the magnolias.
Yeah, I love the magnolia trees. We have them around here, too. Somebody sent me a picture one day, so excited. I got the cherry blossoms. It was magnolias. Sorry to tell you, dude. But, they're a lot different looking. But people, it's the beginning of spring. We're finally through all this. And then spring in Washington, is a lot of tourists, come in. It has not been so much because of the pandemic in recent years, but I used to hate tourists until I started making money off of it.
Right.
And I'm like, come on down. Yeah. I mean, we like to, stand to the right, walk to the right. Doesn't seem to be a real popular thing in America anymore. No. But Washington's getting ready to light up again. I think we'll have a good year. People are starting to come back. Hopefully we're through this pandemic, finally. And and
where do those events stand up with the National Christmas Tree Lighting?
It's sad that politics play into the National Christmas Tree Lighting. You have to get tickets to go. They're free, but you have to win a lottery. Okay. And what they'll do is whoever's president, like right now it's a Democratic president, the Republicans in town will try and get these tickets and then not come to make it look bad on the president. And both sides do this. This isn't one side. This is both sides. And then people like me want to take my grandkids see this kind of thing. We can't get the tickets. I won once in the last 10 years. Right. And, that's a shame. It's a nice show. We can't really see the president very well. He's kind of a ways away. I went when Obama was in. And people say, I don't want to go if he's president. I tell people, we're Washingtonians. I'm a 6th generation. This is our town. You guys just send the politicians here. They're not even our politicians. We don't have a vote. We're a district. For those who don't remember, we're not a state. So we have shadow congresspersons, whatever. Can't vote. So what's the matter? So the Christmas tree lighting cool, and you can come any other day and just walk up to the tree. I felt this year the tree got blown over like a few days before they lit it, and it looked like crap. It looked bad. And misshape, and I guess they did the best they could. But they used to have a lot there. They used to have the Yule logs there. They had singers there. They had the trains under the trees. That's none of that anymore. They just have gone cheap on us, I guess. And it's a shame because this is a national. I once had a group of kids from India, and we were walking through the area, and they said they wanted to see that tree. And I'm thinking, what do you care? You're not even Christians, but they knew about it. That shows you the influence of this.
Do you think DC will ever get its statehood? Too much politics wrapped up in it now.
I don't think so. Because they had a great chance a couple of years ago when it was all Democratic House and Senate and President. So you could swing through that way. And Washington basically cut a deal. Downtown National Mall area would still be a district, but the surrounding part of the city would be a state. And Washington pays more taxes than 23 states. It's not like there's nobody here. There's about 700,000 people in the city. But the only people who really cares is the mayor who wants to be a governor. I mean, the nice part would be we could control things because Congress can control certain laws and budgets. We don't have a National Guard. On January 6th, they want to call out a National Guard to protect the Capitol. We couldn't do it, because we're a district. It had to come from the presidents, to request the guard, and they waited a while. and it had to come from Virginia. And by the time I got there, it was all over. So those kind of things. If they want to, whether you think something like an abortion law, Congress can impose it upon DC, no matter what DC thinks. That stuff bothers people. Other than that, I don't think in your daily life you really care. And the only way we'll get it, the only way we can get this is the Republicans are against it because it's a very heavy Democratic city. It's about 80-some%. They're not giving the Democrats 2 more senators. So you got to bring it in like they used to, like the Civil War era, slave state, free state. When Hawaii and Alaska came in, Hawaii was Democrat, Alaska was Republicans. So if you can find somebody else, we want to break off a piece of Canada or something, I don't know, that's Republicans. Like Puerto Rico wants to be a state, but that's very heavy Democrats. Guam, which none of us know where it is, but it's also Democrats. So we can't find a balance of that. And without that, we're not doing it.
That makes a ton of sense, and I think you're absolutely right about that. I did not think about when Hawaii and Alaska came in. You got one of one to kind of keep the flow, and that DC. I mean, I always knew DC would be Democratic, and that's be a bigger reason why that never happened. But the both is interesting, and I had not known that. Switching gears a little bit, Rick. I'm curious. It's combine time. What are some of the things you miss about being on the daily beat for the Commanders, Redskins?
Oh, well, I always enjoy competing for the news on that. I mean, I was good at that.
I talk about that a bit on the show. I think the average fan doesn't realize the competition level between the writers and the guys on the radio to get the scoops, to get the interviews. Very competitive business.
Yeah, it's maybe not quite as much now because it's like they're all survivors of the Titanic. Whoever's got a job left in the business, because I personally was laid off 6 times in 8 years. I mean, it was crazy. I kept getting better jobs for a while, and then the pandemic wiped us out. But so now I write for the radio station. I have my own Rick Snider's Washington on YouTube, and which has been amazingly watched. We did 5 million views last year. I mean, who knew? People now see what I look like. It's kind of creepy when they come up to me. Like you. I'm sure you get it too. And it's, so we enjoy it. But back in the old days, I grew up in the Watergate era kind of thing. I started in 78. I'm the longest sports writer in town now. We used to live to slit your throat. Now, it wasn't personal, but every day was my job was to beat you. And if you beat me that day, then I'm coming back tomorrow with you. They don't do that quite as much, but they are good people on the beat. There's some very good writers covering the Commanders that I see fans disrespect them all the time. They have no idea. One, these people are working 60, 80-hour weeks. Two, it's a lot of pressure on them. And there's some very good people like Keim and Standick and Nicky Jabala, and I think they do an excellent job. And, once in a blue moon, I'll get one. But I'm more of an analyst now. I'm telling you why things are happening. And I've been through a stadium, chase before. I've been through a team sale before. That helps me be able to tell people why things are going on.
How many combines had you been to?
I went by one. We didn't do it back then in the 90s when I was a beat writer. We really didn't do it. And like off-season camps, maybe me and the Post would be there. It's a changed game. It used to be, casual. I mean, there were times in the spring I'd go cover the horse race in Triple Crown for 6 weeks because there's nothing going on. But now you might get a week or two off and nothing's going on. The NFL has grown so much. I always, I watched the interviews today. The great thing today, too, with TV and Zoom and all, I can see everything without leaving as much. I saw everybody, all the quarterbacks today said, yeah, I met with the Commanders. They were cool. I mean, what else are going to do? Thanks for that information. Well, we're spending my day. I mean, most 90% of stuff is nonsense anyway.
I thought it was interesting when the coaching search was going on this time. And I saw Keim say something about the week before. He thought it was Ben Johnson at that point. And I thought it was interesting because you usually won't get prognosticating from Keim. What was it about this cycle that had everybody so sure early on that it would be Ben Johnson?
Well, you have to do back channel stuff here a lot. This is where talking to people every day pays off in these times. I don't know if I didn't see John say that. I'm not saying he didn't, but it looked like it because they wanted a young, offensive-minded kind of guy. And thank God Ben Johnson had the presence of mind to say, I'm not ready for this. Very few people would have done that. I got a lot of respect for the guy for saying, I'm not ready for this. Because if he had come, he would have failed and we would have wasted 3 more years on this. So thank goodness he walked away in time. It would have been nice if they got in the plane, but whatever. Um, that seemed a little weird. Nobody will hold it against him. I thought it was a really smart act on his part to say that he just didn't feel like it was going to be a good fit here. So to me, when they got down to the final 5, and Adam Peters basically talks a lot about, I want leadership out of this guy, whoever it is. I said it has to be Quinn if that's what you want. He's the only proven guy to have done it. Now, his record was 500 in Atlanta, but I think looking at Quinn now, they absolutely picked the guy they really wanted. Johnson was lackadaisical about whether he wanted the job. Well, how's he going to be a leader, doing that?
Yes.
I liked McDonald out of Baltimore. I looked at that guy, and I'll tell you, Doug, I can do X's and O's, but my superpower after all these years is sizing up people quickly and knowing who's who. And McDonald looked to me like a guy who is, when he's staring at you, is trying to figure out where he's sticking the knife. I mean, this dude's got cold steel in him, and I think he'll be okay if he can communicate well. But he also said, I'm an introvert. And I thought, that gets rid of you because you're not a leader. That's Dan Snyder's biggest problem. He was an introvert who desperately wanted to be, the funny guy in the room and all that. It wasn't his style. And so he forced it and it made it even worse. And so I think that might be McDonald's Achilles heel. Quinn, here's the guy that was following me. We're going to go kill everybody and take all their stuff. And that's what they want. So that's what you got. And I think Quinn, especially having learned once coaching a team, I don't see that as a detriment. Half the last 20 Super Bowls have been won by coaches in their second team, and half have been first teamers. So there's no one way to do this. But I think Quinn picked himself what Abraham Lincoln called a team of rivals. Most presidents always pick all their buddies, people that think like they think, yes, man. Not Lincoln. Lincoln picked the guys that he had to beat for president and in the other opposition party because he wanted differing opinions. And that's what Quinn has done. He's gotten guys that don't know each other necessarily. They've been doing team building exercises. Who does that? In the NFL, that's like what you do with your office at the paper company, or something. They've had to do that. They don't know each other that well yet. I like the Kingsbury one. I think that's a really smart guy. And everybody goes, oh, he failed as a head coach. He's not going to be a head coach here. He's going to be an offensive coordinator here. That's a different job, totally different job. And I think he'll be really good at that. And, and then Joe Witt's another guy that's ready to pick up a rock and smash somebody's head. This dude's ready to rock. He's like Doc Walker, basically. I mean, they're going to decimate you. They're going to, and I like that Witt said, listen, we all got 4-3 and 3-4. That's not what we're talking about. Who's last man standing? And that's very true on defense, especially. Who's the toughest guy in the room? How many times did we see this team come out and they're down 20-0, before they even get mad about anything and try and battle back? Well, how about you come ready to, fight first round?
That would be nice.
And I think Witt's going to have them going out of that locker room saying, let's go kill somebody. And that's what they need. They've got reasonable amount of talent. They're not awful. But you just didn't have guys that they went out there because it's a job, especially after they got that bye with 4 weeks to go. That was the worst thing that could have happened because they already lost 4 in a row. They know nothing's going to happen. Ron's getting fired. They just came back and tried not to get hurt. I watched a lot of missed tackles on people because nobody wants to get hurt, especially if you're a free agent, which they had a lot of, had a couple dozen. And they just finished it out. It's like, you can make me play, but you can't make me care. They'll say opposite, but it's the truth.
I thought it was interesting. There's been this narrative, and you briefly touched on it there. Excuse me, probably not without even trying, but there was this notion that when you get this retread, we already did that. We just got through doing that. But my argument there would be the way Dan Quinn has talked about introspective and learning and adjusting. It felt like when Ron got here, he had been close enough from being let go of released from Carolina that he still felt like he could have done it the right way. And it felt like they came here and tried it again, all with the same band. Your point to Dan Quinn coming here with a totally new group, having looked inside, got a bunch of other guys that are hungry to do it over again, I think is the biggest difference between the two groups. Now, Dan Quinn's job, how quickly can they get all of these voices that have not been in the same room together to meld together so that they can pass that on to the guys, because there's going to be a whole lot of new guys in the locker room too.
Yeah, it'll be at least a year. One thing I'll say about Ron's hiring, he was the right guy to hire at that time, but for a lot of different reasons. But it was time for him to go, and I really wonder how much the cancer took out of him. I mean, right away, he threw a maelstrom of his first year, and then suddenly has cancer, and it's a serious deal. And he didn't show how seriously ill he was. A lot of people would have gone home. I mean, honestly, I would have told him go home. But he battled through, and people somehow took that, they took these, he's standing there folding his arms. It's kind of like if you've ever been sick, you're kind of holding on to yourself like that, when he'd sit down occasionally and stuff. He never would have done that otherwise. And I had a near fatal thing happen to me with a heart attack at Redskin Park. I know how life-changing these things can really be. And I think it took a bite out of the dog on Ron. He was kind of, it's not to be a bad thing. And, it made me a better person in a way. But it's not that rabid animal anymore after you dance with death. So that's what I want to say about Ron. For Dan and the people, it'd probably take a year. And I'd like to think that this year could be a 500 year if it goes right. I mean, this quarterback decision, the number 2 pick thing, will be such a huge decider of things. If you bust on this pick, then you're doomed again. I mean, I think Sam Howell could be an okay quarterback for them, but you can't bust another 2 like you just had Chase Young bust a 2 for you. Like you had RG3s end up being a bust. I mean, they've had a lot of 2s that didn't work out. That's why I'm not in the Caleb Williams business at all. On there, if I had my choice, maybe I'd take May over Daniels. Maybe. I mean, that's close. I think it's really close. It depends on how you fit things. And I'm not sure Kingsbury exactly. Kingsbury might be more of a Daniel quarterback whisperer. But he could probably do either one. But, there's so much else to do. I kind of wonder, do you trade for Fields, use that 2, move down, rebuild your line, get some extra picks? But I don't think so. I think now that we've seen the owner in the room, and I didn't care that he was, but talking to quarterbacks, they're focusing on that because this is a big investment and everything's riding on it. And the owner who paid $6 billion for a ticket has a right to watch.
Ain't no doubt I would have been in the room too, quite frankly. But I do think the point that you make is the most important one, and that's the owner wouldn't have been in the room if the quarterback wasn't it too. I think that was a huge piece of whether he intended it or not. It showed exactly what the plan was, and you don't want to be it too. So I think I have wassled on this. I'm not sure that trading back isn't the right move to make, but that doesn't mean that somebody put it out to me the other day like this. When you pick at 2, it gives you the opportunity to chase the unicorn. And I think that's what you're doing here at 2. Rick, what is it? I have a lot of people that tell me, we've done these redos, we've had new owners, we've had the Shanahans, we've had, the McLuhans. What is it about this reiteration of the organization should give us any better good feelings than we've had all the other times before?
Well, one, Snider's gone. Thank goodness. I mean, you were never going to win with him in the room like that. You just weren't. It's proven like that. At best, you could get to 500, sneaking a wild card, and then they fell apart again.
When did you realize that it was just not going to work with Snider? Do you remember? Was there a moment that you said, "Oh yeah, this isn't it"?
Yeah. Well, first summer, I wasn't dazzled by his willingness to spend a lot of big money on has-been players, but I tell you what, I really woke up to the point. He wanted, he fired Charlie Casserly right away, and he tries to get Bobby Beathard to come back. And Beathard wasn't really interested, but was willing to talk to him about it. And they talked about it, and now he said, "Okay, let me talk to the wife and see." About 20 minutes later, Snider's lawyer calls Beathard and says, "You got 40 minutes." And then he calls back 10 minutes later and says, "You got 30 minutes." Beathard's like, "You have me on a clock for this?" And then the guy, when he calls it 20 minutes, he just tells him to F off, and that was the end of that. And we're all sitting there thinking, you put Bobby Beathard on a clock like that? What are you, insane? That's when I knew we had a real problem here. The arrogance of this group was just unrelenting. They thought they were corporate raiders, and hey, they managed to parlay, some stuff to get to this point, but there was no humility ever in them. And to do something like that, when you blew a chance to bring back Beathard, I told me we got a real problem with this guy.
You mentioned DC earlier. What does your gut tell you about will they get back to RFK?
Yeah, I think it's kind of done now. I mean, Congress just helped pave the way. There was a deal in place about
DC Council was going to always be the bigger issue, right?
Sure. About 3-4 years ago, there was a deal to move to Oxon Cove, Maryland, down by the Wilson Bridge. It's in Maryland. It's about, I don't know, 5-6 miles from RFK, but it would have been crossed over into Maryland, right at the Beltway where Wilson Bridge meets Maryland meets Virginia. And Dan Snider blew it apart because he basically was Larry Hogan was governor of Maryland then. He's just berating Hogan after the deal's done of, "I beat you on this deal. Ha ha, I beat you." To the point that Hogan got mad and pulled the deal. I mean, that's close to being done with this. All right, so where do you go now? Virginia's trying to get this deal with the arena in Alexandria, which is blowing apart the same exact way it blew apart for the Redskins with Cook. The exact same thing is going on. The exact same fight. I was looking for the same 10 holes, for where they were doing this. And it's like, didn't you pay attention to the last guy who didn't have a deal? You don't understand that Virginia's got a state house 100 miles from here that worries about the southern part of the state, not the last 100 yards of the northern part of the state, and splitting that money. So I think Leonsis is going to get his arena in Virginia. But he's got to pay more money for it. But now Virginia's got a lot of money tied up in that. There's no way you're going to say, and we want a stadium for X amount. Because they've already brought that back a couple years ago, because when they said, "We'll give you $1 billion," I was like, hold on. Do you guys understand what you're doing here? And once they did, they pulled that deal. And that's why Snider's gone. He couldn't get a stadium deal out of these people, more than any reason. So I think Virginia's out of the game. Maryland is desperately trying to stay in the game, even though they have the Ravens. They would like to keep this as part of a economic development of that side of the city and state. And maybe it happens. They can at least put some pressure on. But in D.C. now, with Leonsis wanting to leave with the arena, D.C.'s trying to keep something back. They were willing to give Leonsis $500 million to keep the Wizards and Caps there. So if I'm Harris, I go, so $500 million, huh? Okay, that's good. Put that on the plate. We'll start with that. But they want. I mean, the mayor knows you bring back the Commanders, the Redskins of this town. You're made for life. And one day, if this city ever gets a senator or something, things like that, you move up in the pecking order. You'll always have that. And RFK is now that it's going to get through Congress soon. I mean, 2 seconds after the House passed it, I was getting emails. When's it going to the Senate? It's not scheduled yet, but it'll be soon on that. And then it really gives them the final power to make a deal. Now, you still have the city council, which controls the purse strings, but there's money always around in the air for things. I mean, this is how things are done. Just like Leonsis is being blocked by this 80-year-old legislator who runs the Senate Finance Committee in Richmond. When they said, "Hey, what do you think about giving $1 billion, whatever, up north?" She goes, "Do I look like I have dumb blank on my head?" I thought, ooh, okay. This woman's throwing haymakers. She says, "I want this and this for my district." That happens every day. You're just being honest about it. That's how every deal is done, And I'm sure the city council is going to say, "We want this." All right. Hopefully, it's something halfway reasonable, and I think it'll happen. What year? Gosh, if they can get in there by 2028, I'd be a little surprised. It might be 2030.
The 28 was like the earliest number I had in my head, where like feasibility wise. What do they do with the other two sites then? I mean, the numbers came out for the practice facility was not great. I think we already knew that. I mean, that's not on the new owner, but is it will they sell that land there and then try to find something somewhere else, rip it down, particularly if they're in DC, something that would be just a little bit closer? And what do they do with FedEx out in Maryland?
So what I was told is they're probably going to stay in Virginia. I mean, there really isn't land in DC to create your complex, even if you put it next to RFK. So I think they stay in Virginia in the Ashburn area, and around Redskins Park, Commanders Park, which is near Dulles, if you don't know, is where most of the world's internet traffic goes through. These big buildings, something like 3/4 of the world's internet traffic goes through that all around. And Redskin Park, whatever you call it that all the time, it has like these pyramids, these monolith buildings. They're the biggest thing you've ever seen in your life, all around them. And so their land will be sold to these people for several hundred million, but you got to buy land. I mean, I think they'll move somewhere nearby and start over. I mean, it was the building opened in '92, like a month after they won a Super Bowl, if that. So it's aged, but to me, are your fields good? I would say yes, the fields are good there. They have a bubble. That's good too. The rest of this, I laughed when I saw the players voted that their food was a D plus.
I saw you said you were at the kitchen.
Yeah, I actually hadn't been downstairs to eat in many years. We're not really allowed anymore. But I had gone into the team on the team's request to come help them with a podcast that they're putting together on the team's history. So I'm in there on my own time doing that. And they said, hey, we want to say thanks. Come down. Let's eat lunch. I said, well, listen, I'll get it to go because I turned it down 3 times too. And I said, yeah, I know how politics are and how most of these people don't know who I am yet because they just got here, but it feels weird. But I walked through the line, grabbed the salmon was 16-ounce hunks of salmon. Awesome. Strip steaks piled high, shrimp and pasta. Listen, if that's a 6.78 out of 10, I'm eating a 4 on my best day. Most people are eating a 3 on their best day compared to what I do. So what are we talking about? I have to cut it up for you and chew? I mean, win a few games. Maybe we'll do that for you. It's whining. Do you have good? Yeah. I admit their training facility, their training rooms are too small, and some of that is it used to be a 45-man roster and a few guys on practice squad. Now you've got literally 70 guys. You have at least 20 more than you used to. So that's putting strain on the building. The weight rooms, well, a lot of them come from college weight rooms that are ridiculous.
Well, they're all taking a step down as far as the facilities go when they leave these big SEC programs for sure.
I mean, but they always tell me our weight room's a problem. I said, why? Do you have people waiting in line? No. Well, you don't need a bigger weight room. Maybe I'm just the old school guys that you got by. But like I said, with food, I remember the Redskins winning 3 Super Bowls eating McDonald's every day. And I know they did because when they were done, the media could eat what was left. And the Hogs would go through and literally smash every burger in half just to thinking we wouldn't eat it. But you go, hey, this burger's only half smashed. This ain't bad. But they won 3 Super Bowls with McDonald's. So what does it tell you? They had one decent practice field back then. It's about players. It's not about this other stuff.
I have one more for you before we get out of here. With the change, it's all new everything basically in Washington. I'm curious from a reporter standpoint, like how difficult is it? What is the transition from, you've known all these people and made these relationships in the building. And I know that generally you've got relationships league-wide, but here come a whole new cast of characters. What is it like having to get to, introduce yourself and all the hoopla that goes into a new group because it's brand new everything?
Yeah, luckily I've had a lot of practice. I think I've done 10. This is the 10th different one, I think. Right. That I've had to do. I mean, it was weird because Gibbs was around for so long and Pettibone stayed with all the other coaches for a year. And then everybody left. You had Norv for 7 years. He didn't have a lot of change for about 20 years. And then suddenly Snider's bumping guys in and out every year or two. And it's like, whoa, by the time you get to really know anybody, I mean, I remember the young Shanahan when they were all fired, he had tears in his eyes walking around the parking lot. We're all saying goodbye to them on the side. And, now he's, how many years has that been? 14. So now he's an old guy. but you did it. Everybody has a little bit of skepticism, pessimism about them. That is this media guy going to screw me? It takes a while to develop relationships because nobody knows each other like that. And I have to make sure you're not lying to me either, kind of thing. That happens too. I mean, I once did a story I was doing it on a player, and a coach came over and says, "What are you writing about him for?" I said, "Oh, no, that's a feature. I need something." He goes, "Don't do that," because he got cut the next day. So the coach cut me a break, not making me look dumb. Now they wouldn't have done that a lot of times. The COVID era has pushed people back. I used to have much more access to people than we do now. But on the other hand, I think we're going to see, and a lot of that was fueled by Dan Snider, who wanted the media away and basically had a rule: if you put anybody in the building talking to us away, you were fired. So we had to protect them too. I never wanted somebody to lose their job over me. When one of the janitors was fired, he came over and got me because he liked me and took me through the building and showed me where all the hidden cameras were. So I knew how to walk around the corner. Crazy stuff like this goes on all the time. But I think we're in a new era now where they're not going to just look at us and go, back. I think we're going to have a little bit better of a relationship, at least until the first loss. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't all roses covering dogs and all those guys. Trust me. Even though they were winning, different animal back then, different athletes, who didn't like the press anyway. Rigo, can you talk to me? It's like those kind of things, Art Monk. Butts would be like, before I break your arms off, what do you want? Just those kind of things. It's a little more business now. Everybody gets along differently. But it's easier, I think, to cover guys now. And maybe it's because I'm their grandfather's age. Some guy was telling me one day, I'm really worried about my grandparents. They're in this, hurricane path. I said, how old are they? I figured he'd say 70, 80. He goes, 56. I'm like, son of a bitch. Get away from me. Scott McLuhan's talking about when I get old, I'm going to retire. And we say, how old is that? He goes, I don't know, 50. Yeah. And I'm in my 60s now. So that's the oldest guy left. I got nowhere else to go. I don't know. So I still do this. I really thought about retiring. And Dan Snider announced he was leaving, selling. And I thought, I'm sticking around now.
That's right.
I've been through all this crap forever. I want to see. And I do know other people in the building like that who said, man, I suffered through years of this BS. I want to stick around for something good, or at least decent to work here. And so that's why people are. They didn't make a lot of changes on business side kind of thing, but those kind of people flip over every few years mostly anyway. But I think everybody there is a much happier group. You can tell when I was in the building last week, I had never seen the building that focused and that much energy to it. And you could see coaches moving and people had a plan. They were getting work. You could see a difference. And I think that's a real encouraging sign for this organization. I expect good things. I think if you get this number 2 pick right, if you hit on some things, you can be a serious team again in 2-3 years.
I think so. The roster needs a real redo. I was looking at it the other day. It's rough, but you're right. It all starts with that number 2. Well, it all starts with the new front office and the coaching staff, and then it gets down to getting that number 2 pick right, because as we've seen, you can have all the good stuff. If you don't have a quarterback that can pick a team up and lead it, then you're still searching for a quarterback, and that is the key to the game. The name of the book, Presidential Pours, Commanders and Cocktails. It's a fun read, an easy read. We were looking at it the other day, so highly recommend it. Rick, as always, your wealth of information, I love it. So, and always love it having you on the podcast. So I appreciate your time today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, buy the book here. I'll show it to you again. There you go. Presidential Pours. I'll be a whore. I have to be a whore in my old age to make money like this. And, I do Rick Snider's Washington. It's 2-minute clips because that way we're in and out. People say, I need more than 2 minutes. I say, you sound like my wife. This is enough of this, So I just make it quick and to the point, and everybody can move on with their lives. And we try to have some fun with it. I do other things too. I do food shows. I did a piece of fried chicken in a small country store. I was sitting there eating in the parking lot, eating a piece of chicken, and it was good chicken. 104,000 people watched me eat that piece of chicken. What kind of nonsense is that? You know,
It's amazing what people watch and don't watch. Sometimes I'll think I've got a show and it's going to be the greatest thing ever, and it's like no views, and then we'll do something really stupid and it's a couple thousand views. To your point, so
yeah, I do pizza shows too, where I sit with old sports writers and we eat pizza and talk about it. And people love these things. So I try to do a variety of things because I've had a long career. I mean, I've been in the serious days of all this. And,
yeah,
I had the heart attack at Redskin Park working that hard. And luckily, this is my purgatory to forever wander the building, I think. I don't know on there. It used to be in the 80s and even 90s. Redskin fans would die and they had their ashes scattered around the practice facility fields. And it was one of those things that the team didn't encourage, but they would do it quietly. I know the guy who did it. They would do it with respect and quality, but people would. Now I think they burn the place down first, but for all that, that's how different it's changed.
yeah.
I love the team so much, but it's my hometown, and it's been great to do. That all my friends think I have something important. Who knows on that? I wish they wouldn't. I went to a family Christmas party once. 7 people in a row came up to me and said, "Hey, what's Kirk Cousins going to do?" "Oh, hey, cousin, how are you? Merry Christmas." No, I was like ready to have a press conference in the kitchen to just finish it. So sometimes it's like that, but it's still a cool job to have, and I've been very lucky to be doing this that I never wanted to cover the Redskins. A lot of pressure, a lot of hard work, but I knew that was where if you want to be important and be big, this is where you go. And this team will get back to it. It might take a minute, but I think this team is finally headed to the back to being good again.
Well, I hope you're right, Rick. I hope you're right.
Yeah, we can do a new hail to go back to the Redskins too. That's what I tell them. People ask me, if I were them, I'd call Al Davis and say, "We're going back to the Redskins. NFL, if you don't like it, you can talk to my lawyers." Al Davis always did that and never got beat. And I knew people on the team have told me, "Listen, we wouldn't lose any ticket sales. We know that. It's the corporate world." Yeah, but the corporate world will boycott you for a year, and then they'll go back to doing what they do. Remember, they used to say, "We're not going to sell Redskin stuff on Etsy or eBay." And it's there. They just waited until people weren't looking anymore. And I think they could fight their way back to it if they wanted, but I don't think they will. I don't know when the name is. That's the other question I get. I think maybe if a new stadium comes along and they haven't done anything,
That's what I've always said.
Then maybe you change it. Then you win a Super Bowl, people aren't going to give up on the name anymore. They'll be into the new name on that. So we'll get
winning.
there.
Winning, as they say, helps everything. I think if they went back to the original Redskins uniforms from say 4 or 5 years ago, even like the first year they did Washington football team, right? It was still those Redskins uniforms. They just they redid the helmet. I think you get people more excited if you just do that. I think people can get over the name, or even if you went back to Washington football team, I think it's the uniforms that for whatever reason people have had a hard time getting behind.
I ditched the black uniforms. That's the Steelers. I hate the black uniforms. They're just not burgundy and gold. They're black. That's not this team. Yeah. But they did it because black sells well apparel-wise, slimming. So I like to wear it. But, it's, that's why they went to it. It was stupid. It was short-sighted. But, yeah, I wish they could put the arrow back on a helmet. They really wanted to do the Warriors, and then the NFL kind of pushed them off of that, saying, let's get away from Indian imagery. And I'm like, Warriors goes back to the first caveman throwing a rock at the other guy. I mean, the Greeks, all these warriors. We could have made it the military kind of team, the American hero, the American military be the logo kind of thing with our warriors protecting us. Big opportunity there they missed.
I agree. They had a window for it and they missed it. All right, Rick, I appreciate you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. I'll see you again sometime.
No doubt.